Should this be your next ebook reader? Let's check it out. Dave Taylor here, and I'm checking out this. This is the Nook GlowLight 4 from Barnes Noble. It's the first of their new generation of Nook ebook readers. Easy way to tell, it has USB-C for charging rather than that yicky old micro USB. Not a fan. But there's a lot to really like about this tiny little, incredibly light and small enough to hold in one hand without any fatigue ebook reader. It's a 6-inch high-res 300 dpi screen, and its actual resolution, if you look at it this way, is 1440 by 1080. So this is actually kind of, sort of, an HD resolution e-ink screen. Now, e-ink is super interesting because it is actually a technology designed to mimic the light characteristics of paper. So here's a photo of me with the e-ink screen in direct sunlight. I promise you, if you took your tablet or your iPad or your computer screen and had it in that bright a direct morning sunlight, you'd barely be able to see it unless you cranked the brightness all the way up. But that is without any backlighting at all. It's just the default light because that's how e-ink works. Now, the challenge is that e-ink then has to be illuminated somehow for you to read it in low light situations. And the Barnes & Noble team came up with two different solutions for that. They have what they call night mode, and I can show you there's two, right? So there's night mode. So now I've turned off the backlighting. You see it's not quite as bright. Let me sort of keep it on camera while I turn it back on. You can see that makes a big difference in the lower light situation. But they also have night mode, and night mode's really interesting because this is all part of that whole sort of industry recognition of the blue light problems at nighttime. So if you turn on night mode, it will gradually change the lighting on the screen from a blue tint to an orange tint based on the time of day. So you probably won't even notice. If you're just sitting there and you're immersed in your latest book, then over time it'll be like, oh, it's not as blue as it was. And that's actually really good for the serotonin in your brain, for your ability to go to sleep, for eye strain. Lots of reasons to like that. And that's separate from what they call the glow light, hence the name GlowLight 4. So generally speaking, I keep that on during the day, but you know, if I'm going to be outside, I will turn it off and even further extend my battery life. And you can also see one of the other interesting characteristics is that it has buttons on the edges, and you can actually change their behavior, but generally speaking, the top button is going to go in this direction, and then the top button on the other side will go back. And now I'm here, I'm just looking at the library, and one of the other great things about this, 32 gig of storage. A lot of these devices, if you look at the comparable size Kindle from Amazon, it's 8 gig, right? If you want to go up to 32 gig, you have a significant bump in price. But 32 gig literally lets you save and store hundreds of books. Hundreds of books. You can pick your favorite authors and you can have all their works all on your device. And then once it's fully charged, it generally runs 3 to 4 weeks on a charge. You could take it for that week-long backpacking adventure up in the mountains and not have to worry about, oh, how do I charge it when it's 3 days in and I've run out of battery? That won't happen, and you can read like a lunatic. Now, if you're backpacking and reading, then you probably also want to keep an eye out on where you're walking. But generally speaking, there's a lot of interesting capabilities here. It also, by the way, works with PDFs. So if you're a student, this is sort of an interesting way to get some PDFs and read them while you're on the train or on an airplane or something. And again, what I really like is this extraordinary battery life because it just lasts and lasts and lasts. It's a soft touch finish. For people that are familiar with the entire Nook line, the bezel, which is this outer frame, is considerably thinner than on previous generations. So they have a small form factor with a decent sized screen, which is always a win. And let's see, what else can I tell you? That's much of what makes this really interesting. What I did is I just sort of picked a book, and you have to sort of get used to e-ink because e-ink doesn't just immediately change. There's a little bit of a delay, but not much. You can see here, if I was reading, this is as painless as it gets. And if you don't like the buttons, you can always swipe. That's fine. You can use it however you prefer. You can remap the buttons. There's 2 on each side, so you can reverse the order. You can do everything on one side, forward and backward, all on that one side. I mean, it's super flexible. And the Nook library from Barnes Noble has tons of books. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of books. And what I really like is they also have a section called like $2.99 and less. So you can go and pick up a book, and maybe it's not the very best book from one of your favorite authors, but it's kind of fun to go back and read other titles. And if you're preparing for a cruise or something, then being able to dump a dozen books on there gives you the freedom to say, I don't like this one so much. I think I'm going to just go to the next one. Super easy. So dimensions wise, 6.1 inches by 4.7 inches by 3/10 of an inch thick, and it's 6.7 ounces. Honestly, if you had an apple or an orange in the other hand, that would be heavier than this Nook. So there's lots to like about it, and I will just say in the really cute little box, there is one more thing worth noting, and that is the charging cable. USB-A, the rectangle on one end, USB-C on the other, and there is no little charging cube. So you will need to have something to plug this into. More likely than not, you already have something, and you could also plug this into your computer and it will charge off of that. And that's it. It's a really nice little box. I feel like Barnes & Noble is really stepping up their game, and I know that their plan is to have a lot more revision on the Nook line, and totally makes sense. You know, the idea that something this small can contain hundreds of books is kind of magic. And then to have this screen technology, which is very, very close to reading it on paper. I know it's not actually paper. You don't actually move the screen to get to the next page. And I like paper books too, but I really like the convenience of this, and particularly if you're traveling, and particularly if you're traveling overseas and you're not sure about connectivity, here you go. You have your travel guide and your 10 favorite books that you have on your reading list. So all of that is going to keep you covered for weeks on end. Super convenient, super handy. Only thing left to talk about is the price, but before we get to the price, I'm going to ask if you could subscribe to my channel. Really appreciate that. A click or a tap on the subscribe button and we're connected. Cool. Now, this, let me get back to the home screen. You can do that with a single tap on the N button at the bottom, if I push it correctly. There we go. So now I'm back to my home screen, and you can see there's some toolbar along the bottom. But this is the Nook GlowLight 4 from Barnes & Noble, and it's $149.99 at barnesandnoble.com. Now, I don't know whether they'll have discount pricing at some point, but I will say it's a little spendy until you remember the 32 gig of storage, and then you realize, well, that actually is pretty darn sweet. It's also, honestly, the price of what, 5 hardback bestsellers? So, you know, instead of that, get them on this, and now you've paid for the device forever. And generally, ebooks are less expensive than print books, which should be the case. Anyway, that's all I got. I'm going back to this Alex Shaw novel, so I'll have to catch you in my next video.